I promised myself I'd never speak about that night. The one that left me shaking, staring into the dark, wondering if I even recognized my own family anymore. But silence is killing me. My sister's hand cracked against my cheek so hard, the sound bounced off the glass display cases like a gunshot. The whole jewelry store froze. She called me Shadow, her favorite insult, because, for once, the attention wasn't on her. And just as I stood there, stunned, face stinging, a billionaire walked in. He glanced at her, his expression cold, and said, "Touch my wife again and see." Amber's face drained of color. She stammered, actually stammered, while the world tilted on its axis. That moment wasn't just about a slap. It was about me realizing I'd spent years folding myself smaller, living behind her spotlight. And that day? That day I finally stepped out of the shadow she'd shoved me into my entire life. I'm Jessica, 27, and what happened last Tuesday in Bellamy's, this jewelry store so exclusive it feels like it deserves its own zip code, changed everything for me. That morning, I wasn't just shopping. My heart was pounding because I was about to buy something I had dreamed about for years, a pair of diamond earrings. Not the costume jewelry I used to wear in high school. Not the clearance rack knockoffs I used to grab when I felt desperate for a little sparkle. Real diamonds. Something I had saved for month after month, dollar by dollar. After years of scraping by, I finally had something to celebrate. I was standing there, clutching the little velvet tray, trying not to cry out of sheer pride, when the chime above the glass door rang. And in stormed Amber. Her face? A storm cloud of fury. And before I could even blink, her palm collided with my cheek. Now, let me back up. Growing up with Amber was like living in the path of a permanent hurricane. She was 2 years older, forever the pretty one, the star. If I was steady, she was dazzling. If I worked quietly, she made noise loud enough for the whole world. Our parents didn't live in a mansion. Dad was a high school teacher. Mom ran a boutique. We weren't rich. But every extra dollar seemed to orbit directly around Amber. Ballet lessons, cheerleading camps, shopping trips every season. And me? I worked babysitting jobs just to buy my own art supplies or save for the cheapest version of design software. Whenever I pointed out the favoritism, Mom brushed me off. "Jessica, you're so independent. Amber just needs a little more support." But independence wasn't some noble trait I had chosen, it was survival. By the time I was 20, I was already out of the house, grinding full-time at a print shop while taking night classes for my degree. Amber, meanwhile, stayed home until 25, failing out of community college again and again. When she finally graduated, our parents rewarded her with a condo. That was Amber's life. And mine? Hard work, no shortcuts. Last month, though, something shifted. It was my 5th anniversary at Boyd Creative. I had clawed my way up from junior designer to handling massive accounts. My boss had just given me a raise that felt like oxygen. Real breathing room. And I thought, finally, I'm going to buy something just for me. Not rent, not bills, not groceries. Something that would sparkle, that would remind me every time I looked in the mirror, "You did this, Jessica. You earned this." Diamond earrings. But of course, my family dinner had to ruin the moment before it even began. That Sunday, I walked into my parents' house, ready to announce my promotion, maybe, just maybe, feel seen. But as soon as dessert plates hit the table, Amber hijacked the evening. She shrieked, "Everyone! I have an announcement," and flashed a giant diamond ring like it was an Olympic medal. Her boyfriend of 5 months, Trevor, just stood there with a forced grin, looking like he wasn't entirely sure what had just happened. Mom rushed to hug her, Dad clapped Trevor on the back as though he had just solved world peace. And me? When I finally slipped in, I got promoted, Mom didn't even lift her eyes from Amber's hand. "That's nice, honey. Now Amber, tell us exactly how he proposed." That night, I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. That was it. The earrings weren't just a gift anymore. They were a declaration. A reminder that my achievements mattered, even if no one else in that room cared. So Tuesday morning, I put my plan into motion. I took a half day off work. Slipped into my best navy dress, styled my hair until it shone, swiped on just enough makeup to feel polished but not overdone. I even wore heels, something I avoid at all costs as a sneakers girl. Because I wanted to walk into that store and look like I belonged there. And when I pushed open the heavy glass doors of Bellamy's, everything felt different. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like captured rainbows. Soft classical music played in the background. The faint scent of perfume hung in the air, expensive and subtle. Every staff member moved like they were part of some luxury ballet, all tailored suits and warm smiles. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair walked over. "Welcome to Bellamy's. How may I assist you today?" My throat tightened, but I managed. "I'm looking for diamond earrings. Something small but high quality. It's my first real purchase." Her face lit up. "Your first diamonds? That's a milestone. Let's find something perfect." She led me to a case, explaining cut, clarity, color. I started to relax, letting the thrill build in my chest. And then, the chime above the door rang again. I wouldn't have turned around. But then came her voice. Amber's voice. "Oh my God, Jessica, what are you doing here?" She stood there in white jeans tight enough to cut off circulation, a silky pink blouse, and heels that clicked dramatically against the floor. Her 2 college friends, Bridget and Kayla, flanked her like backup dancers. Her hair, freshly highlighted, bounced in perfect waves. And she sneered, "Are you lost? Isn't this place a little out of your league?" And that was just the beginning. Tara's brows lifted, just a fraction, but she never lost that practiced, calm smile. "Your sister is looking at our diamond collection," she said, voice smooth as silk. Would you like to join us? Amber sauntered over, her friends trailing like a shadow-cast entourage. She laughed, the sound sharp in that hushed room. Oh, yes, we, share DNA, she drawled, the insult disguised as a joke. The comparison hung there, heavy and sticky. Amber had always been the sunshine version of us, blonde, blue-eyed, the one who made strangers stop and look. Me? I get my looks from Dad, darker, leaner, more athletic, the kind of face that doesn't immediately stop traffic. I kept my voice level. I didn't know you were coming, I said. Are you shopping for wedding bands? Just looking, she shrugged, leaning in to peer at the glass. Trevor and I will probably go to Cartier in Scottsdale. She flicked a glance at me. What are you buying? Costume stuff? Tara cleared her throat, stepping in like a professional referee. Actually, your sister has very refined taste. She's looking at these half-carat studs. She held up a delicate pair, the light catching in tiny explosions. Amber's smile thinned as she inspected them. Half a carat with your salary? Amber said, the words a needle. Heat rose to my face. I got a promotion, I said, saying it plain. I could feel the little victory like a coin in my chest. I can afford them. Promotion at that little print shop? Amber's tone was all condescension. What does that even mean, an extra $1 an hour? Bridget snorted. Kayla pretended to be interested in a bracelet a few feet away. An older couple in the corner gave us that look some people give when they witness bad theater. It's a graphic design agency, I corrected, because titles mattered in our world even if they meant nothing to her. And the raise is meaningful. Amber scoffed and picked up another pair of earrings, the gesture casual and scalpel precise. Well, if you had any sense, you'd invest that money instead of blowing it on sparkle. That's always been your problem, isn't it? Bad decisions. Therapy taught me to breathe through her barbs, but the words still landed like stones. Tara, sensing the temperature spike, tried to steer us back to the gems. These would complement your complexion beautifully, she said, lifting the stud toward my ear. The princess cut through tiny stars across my skin. For a moment I could almost feel how pretty it would look. They're perfect, I murmured, and I meant it. I'll take them. Amber stepped closer, her perfume a syrupy cloud. Seriously, she hissed. You're buying thousands of dollars of earrings right after I announced my engagement? How predictable. The accusation landed like a slap, sharp, stunned, absurd. What does my buying earrings have to do with your engagement? I asked, bewildered now. This isn't about you being the center of attention. You've always been jealous of me. My voice rose without meaning to. You're the one who's always craved the spotlight. She laughed, a brittle, dangerous sound. In your shadow? Please. Amber cut me off before I could explain. You're the one Mom brags about, scholarship, career, perfect Jessica. The room bent around her version of the truth. For a second I didn't recognize the map of our childhood she was describing. Had we lived in the same house? Had she forgotten the nights I worked double shifts so we could keep the lights on? That's not true, I said quietly, but the store was listening now. 2 more salespeople had stopped what they were doing. A woman near the necklace counter edged away, pretending to look at a display and failing. You know what? I don't have to listen to this. I turned to Tara. I'd like to purchase the earrings. Amber grabbed my arm then, nails perfectly manicured, digging into my skin. Don't you dare walk away. I wrenched free. Don't make a scene. Her grip tightened. This is embarrassing. Embarrassing, she spat. You're the one buying jewelry you can't afford just to upstage my engagement. No, I said, something finally snapping inside me. This is mine. I earned it. I saved for months. My chest felt tight, every word a small, liberating act. Tara slid the studs into a little velvet box like she was trying to hide the moment from growing. She moved toward the register with a practiced efficiency. Amber followed, cheeks flushing, fury simmering just below the surface. How much are those? Tara asked, looking to me for confirmation. I nodded. $2,800, she said, measured and calm. Amber's mouth fell open. 2,800? You're insane. It's what Mom and Dad spent on 1 semester of Amber's college, I replied, voice steady now. I worked through school. I'd rehearsed that line in my head a dozen times, the small triumph of remembering it aloud. This is my money. You're just trying to prove something because you're jealous of my ring, my fiancé, my life, Amber accused. No, I said softly, and the truth landed cleaner than anything else I'd said that night. I never have been. Those words, plain, unadorned, seemed to break something inside her. Her face twisted. Her hand lifted, and before I had time to brace, it cut through the air and met my cheek with a sound that made the chandelier seem to shiver. Pain flared hot across my skin and tears sprang into my eyes that I didn't bother to hide. The store exhaled, the classical music seemed to stop mid-note. My palm went to my burning face. I stared at Amber, at the woman who'd been my sister by blood but something else by habit, and I felt a shock that went deeper than the physical sting. In all my 27 years, she'd never struck me. Not once. Not until that moment. Tara's mouth formed a perfect little O. Bridget and Kayla froze like actors who'd suddenly lost their cue, eyes darting to the floor. The security guard straightened, every muscle a taut line ready to move. And then, from behind me, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the stunned silence, low and calm and carrying the kind of weight that stops rooms cold. Touch my wife again and see. The man's voice belonged to someone who didn't need to shout to be heard, it simply carried. He was tall, late 30s maybe, wearing a charcoal suit cut so precisely it looked like it had been sketched on him. His hair was dark and immaculate, but it was his eyes that snagged my attention, steel gray, steady, like he'd seen enough of the world to know how to stop it when necessary. Excuse me, Amber stammered, the swagger gone from her shoulders. The stranger stepped forward and put himself, deliberately, politely, between us. It was the kind of move that said, without cruelty, I will not allow this. You heard me. You lay a hand on my wife again and you'll regret it. There was a stillness that followed, like someone had paused a movie mid-sentence. Tara glanced from him to me, worry written all over her face. Even the security guard slowed his approach. Your wife? Amber echoed, incredulous. My brain wrestled with the same thought. Had I seen this man before? Did our paths cross somewhere in a magazine or an airport lounge? His confidence didn't waver, but there was a softness in the way he turned to me, as if seeing me more clearly for the first time. Claire, are you all right? He asked, changing tone so it became question and comfort both. I opened my mouth, I'm not, and then closed it. He'd already faced Amber again, voice returning to that controlled, granite-hard cadence. I don't appreciate watching someone get assaulted in public. I suggest you leave before I ask security to escort you out. Amber's face shifted through a few shades, confusion, annoyance, then a calculated offense. Do you even know who I am? She snapped. That's my sister, not your wife. Her name is Jessica. The room leaned in to hear my name said like that, like it should mean something she didn't think it did. He blinked and looked at me properly, as if matching a face to a memory. A faint color rose at the base of his throat as understanding landed. I apologize for the confusion, he said, the composure slipping for a heartbeat. But my point stands. That behavior is unacceptable. Curiosity and a little warmth unfurled when I heard the name he offered next. Who are you? I asked. Harrison Walsh. He extended a hand, firm, confident, the kind of handshake that announces itself. He said it like a person who'd been named in headlines more than once. And I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. From behind, you look very much like my wife, Claire. The name hit like a small bell. Harrison Walsh, founder of Innovate Tech, the company everyone in my industry whispered about for its security software and the fortune that followed. Magazines used his face for covers. His net worth probably had more zeros than my rent checks did. Away from the shock, Amber's tone did a weird flip, the hostility melted into a syrupy, nauseating charm. Oh my God, Mr. Walsh, what an honor. She gushed, empty and immediate. Harrison didn't afford her more than a passing glance. Are you all right? He asked me again, genuine this time. I nodded, fingers still pressed to my hot cheek. I'm fine, I lied, because fine sounded better than what I felt. He cocked his head, and I could tell he'd made a small internal note, this was more than a mix-up. My concern is real, he added. Family disagreements shouldn't become physical. Amber tried to press damage control, voice slipping into frantic mode. We were joking. Sisters being dramatic. Jessica knows I didn't mean anything, the lie had the bluntness of someone who believed repeating a thing enough would make it true. I felt my blood cool and then boil. That's not true, I said, sharper than I'd intended. You slapped me because I wouldn't let you make me feel small for buying something for myself. Absurd, Amber snapped, and then, to Harrison, she's overdramatic. She's upset because I got engaged and she's single. Her pleading eyes were all performance. Harrison's face was unreadable, but his voice stayed even. I saw what happened. She belittled your accomplishment, tried to shame you for spending your own money, and when that failed she assaulted you. There was no theatrics in the way he said it, just a factual, unblinking recounting. By then the store's security guard arrived, accompanied by a man in an immaculate pinstriped suit who introduced himself in the sort of voice that belongs to someone who owns things. Mr. Walsh, he said politely. Is there a problem, sir? Harrison nodded and indicated Amber with a tight motion. This woman assaulted another customer. A chill moved through Amber. I did not, she began, but Mr. Bellamy, the owner, I realized, had already closed ranks. We have a zero-tolerance policy for violence, he said, businesslike. I must ask you and your party to leave immediately. Amber sputtered the name of our father, as if pedigree might reverse the facts. Mr. Bellamy didn't blink. That's irrelevant, he replied. He turned to his security, Frank, please escort them out. Frank was all quiet authority. He guided Amber and her companions toward the exit with the measured courtesy of someone opening a door on a storm. Amber kept on her song until she reached the threshold, her face flushed and furious. You'll regret this, Jessica, she spat over her shoulder. Wait until Mom and Dad hear how you humiliated me. Her words were loud enough that they hung in the glittering air after the door closed. For a beat, everyone in the store seemed to hold its breath, the salespeople, the couple near the bracelets, even Harrison. My cheeks still burned from the slap and from the humiliation and from the sudden, weird clarity of being seen by a stranger who'd stepped into my defense. Had that been me a year ago, the one who would have smiled, diffused, smoothed the edges of an argument to keep peace at any cost? Would I have swallowed the moment and pretended nothing happened? Not this time. Not when my hand still tingled from where Amber's nails had dug in. Not when I could hear the steady, sure thrum of my own heartbeat, like an ally. Harrison offered me a small, curious look, not pity, not spectacle, just a simple question in his eyes, are you okay? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket, and the noise was tiny but sharp, a single, insistent note that felt, in that suspended second, like the beginning of something I could not yet name. The air inside Bellamy's still felt charged after Amber stormed out. Sales associates whispered in the corners, the chandeliers sparkled a little too brightly, and my cheek still burned from her slap. Harrison Walsh turned toward me, regret softening the sharp lines of his face. I've made this mess more complicated, and I'm sorry, he said quietly. Please, let me make it up to you. Coffee, after you finish here. I'd like to explain properly. I blinked, not entirely sure what universe I'd stepped into. A billionaire who'd just mistaken me for his wife was now inviting me for coffee. But something about his tone, calm, earnest, not pushy, made me nod. Okay. Coffee would be nice. Mr. Bellamy himself rang up my purchase, offering a string of apologies in a voice heavy with formality. My hands trembled as I signed the slip, adrenaline still running wild. Tara slipped the blue velvet bag into my palm with a discreet smile, as though handing me more than just jewelry. Harrison waited by the door, patient and composed, like this was all somehow normal. We walked a block to a quiet cafe tucked away from the bustle of the main street. It was all low lighting, soft jazz, and polished wood, the kind of place I'd usually hurry past, assuming I couldn't afford even the cheapest item on the menu. I come here when I need to think, Harrison explained as a server led us into a private corner booth. They make excellent espresso and don't bother their customers. He ordered an Americano. I asked for a latte, trying to steady my hands around the ceramic cup when it arrived. Harrison leaned forward, expression apologetic. I need to explain. My wife, Claire, is in London right now. I came into Bellamy's to find her an anniversary gift. From behind, the hair, the dress, the height, you looked so much like her. And when I saw you being slapped, his jaw tensed. I reacted on instinct. I managed a half smile. Well, your instinct probably stopped things from getting worse. Amber doesn't handle being corrected in public. His gaze darkened. Family can be complicated. I won't presume to understand yours. You read it right, I admitted, wrapping both hands around the warm mug. Amber has always been the favorite. Me standing up for myself? That's new. She doesn't like it. Harrison gave a small nod. My brother and I had that dynamic once. Tyler always resented living in my shadow after Innovate Tech took off. Did it get better? I asked. Yes. It took distance, time, and some brutally honest conversations. But we worked through it. Now he runs our European division. All on his own merit. For a moment, I forgot who he was, forgot the billions attached to his name, because the way he said it was so grounded, so human. We talked easily. I told him about Amber, my parents, the countless times my work was minimized or brushed aside. He listened, actually listened. He gestured toward the blue bag beside me. So, those earrings. They aren't just jewelry. No, I said firmly. They're proof. Proof my work means something. That I mean something. Even if my family doesn't see it. Understanding flickered in his eyes. When I sold my first software at 19, I bought a ridiculous watch. Not because I needed it, but because it symbolized what I'd accomplished. The validation. Exactly, I said, surprised he'd captured the feeling so perfectly. Time slid by faster than I expected. When his phone buzzed, he frowned slightly. I have a meeting in 30 minutes. But before I go, what exactly do you do in design? I'm lead designer at Boyd Creative, I said, straightening a little. We handle branding and marketing. My specialty's digital media integration. His interest sparked instantly. Digital media integration? Our marketing team is desperate for fresh perspective on a new consumer security app. He paused. Would you be open to sending me your portfolio? No pressure, just the possibility of an opportunity. My heart gave a startled kick. Innovate Tech. Even in interview there was career gold. I'd love to, I managed, trying not to sound too eager. Harrison pulled a sleek card from his wallet and slid it across the table. Email me directly. I'll make sure it gets in front of our creative director. We stood, preparing to leave. But before we stepped out into the sunlight, he looked at me one last time. Don't let your sister's outburst tarnish what you accomplished today. Those earrings are a symbol of your hard work. Wear them with pride. I nodded, throat tight. Thank you. For everything. And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed the words. Walking back to my car, the desert sun warm on my shoulders, I realized something strange. I felt light. Lighter than I had in years. My cheek still throbbed from Amber's slap, and my stomach twisted at the thought of what fallout was coming, but underneath all of it was something new. Relief. Harrison's words, his calm certainty, had cracked something open inside me. For the first time, I had stood my ground without apologizing for daring to exist. My phone buzzed nonstop as I drove home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the screen was lit up with notifications like fireworks. 3 texts from Mom, 2 from Dad, 7 from Amber. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat. Whatever storm they were brewing could wait until I was ready. Later that night, I curled into the couch, shoes kicked off haphazardly by the door, and finally looked at the messages. 23 texts. 9 missed calls. Amber's tone shifted like a weather pattern I knew too well. First came the rage, how dare you embarrass me like that? Then the guilt tripping, Mom is heartbroken because of you. And finally, the twisted olive branch, I forgive you for overreacting. As though she were the victim offering me grace. My parents' texts were no better. Everyone demanded I call immediately to explain why I'd humiliated Amber in public. Not a single word about her hitting me. Not one acknowledgement of the mark still burning on my skin. I put the phone aside, heart pounding, and reached for the velvet box instead. Under the lamplight, the diamonds flared alive, scattering rainbow fragments across my living room wall. My throat tightened. They weren't just earrings, they were proof. Proof that every late night, every sacrificed weekend, every time I chose work over rest, it all added up to something real. Something mine. Instead of spiraling in my family's drama, I opened my laptop and pulled up my digital portfolio. If Harrison Walsh had been serious about his offer, I needed to be ready. I polished case studies, updated project notes, tightened captions. For once, my focus was entirely on my future, not their approval. The very next morning, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with an email that made my hands tremble so badly I almost dropped my coffee. Jessica, thank you for sending your impressive portfolio. Our creative director, Amy Sullivan, would like to meet with you this Friday at 2 p.m. Please confirm if this works with your schedule. Regards, Harrison Walsh. I sat frozen for a full minute, rereading it. This wasn't a polite brush off. He'd actually arranged an interview. I confirmed the time immediately, then spent the rest of the morning floating between disbelief and electric excitement. That evening, I finally gathered the courage to return one of those missed calls. Mom picked up on the first ring, her voice sharp with disapproval. Jessica Marie Hayes, what on earth happened yesterday? Amber is absolutely devastated. I inhaled deeply. Mom, did Amber mention she slapped me across the face in the middle of a store? A pause, long enough for me to hear the faint clink of dishes in the background. She said there was a misunderstanding. That you were making a scene about her engagement. That's not what happened, I said firmly. I was buying earrings to celebrate my promotion, which, by the way, no one congratulated me for on Sunday. Amber showed up, insulted me, and when I wouldn't shrink down like usual, she hit me. Hard enough to leave a mark. Well, I'm sure she didn't mean it. She didn't mean it? My voice cracked sharp. A stranger had to step in, Mom. The owner asked her to leave. Do you know who that stranger was? Harrison Walsh. Yes, that Harrison Walsh. He saw everything, and he called her behavior exactly what it was. Silence. I could picture Mom, lips pressed tight, mind racing. Finally, she muttered, your sister is still very upset. I'm sure she is. Accountability usually upsets people when they're not used to it. That's a terrible thing to say about your sister. Is it? I asked, voice low. When's the last time Amber faced real consequences? When's the last time you or Dad didn't rush to her defense? Another pause. Then the same tired refrain, we don't take sides. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, you've been taking sides my entire life. You just never picked mine. Her breath caught, and for once, she didn't have a quick rebuttal. Instead, her voice tightened, clipped. I don't know what's gotten into you. This isn't like you at all. Maybe that's the problem, I said softly. Maybe this is exactly who I should have been all along. The call ended soon after, with Mom disappointed and suggesting, of course, that I apologize to Amber. I promised I'd think about it, but I knew the truth as I set the phone down. For the first time, I had no intention of calling. No apology. Not this time. Not ever again. Friday morning arrived like a current running through my veins, equal parts anticipation and nerves. I stood in front of my mirror one last time, smoothing the lapel of my blazer, fastening my new diamond studs into place. They caught the light, tiny sparks that made me feel braver than I had any right to be. I whispered to myself, you earned this. You belong here. I reached Innovate Tech headquarters 15 minutes early, deliberately choosing punctuality as my first impression. The building itself took my breath away, soaring glass panels, sleek lines, and a lobby transformed into a vertical rainforest with a living wall of lush tropical plants. It didn't just say, success. It whispered, future. The receptionist smiled warmly and directed me to the 14th floor. An assistant named Jordan met me there, cheerful and efficient. Miss Sullivan is running a few minutes behind, he explained, guiding me toward a plush waiting area with sweeping city views. Water or coffee? Water would be great, thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the butterflies circling my stomach. As Jordan disappeared, a familiar voice cut through the hum of the office. Jessica. I turned, and there was Harrison Walsh, dressed more casually this time, dark jeans, navy button-down, sleeves rolled back just enough to soften his commanding presence. His smile was genuine, warm. Glad you could make it. How are you feeling? Good, I admitted with a nervous laugh. A little, jittery. No need, he reassured. Amy was impressed by your portfolio, especially the Sunrise Healthcare campaign. She's eager to meet you. We talked briefly, nothing heavy, just enough to keep me calm, until she arrived. Amy Sullivan walked in like a spark of color, her copper hair gleaming under the recessed lighting, her green-framed glasses bold against her face. She extended her hand firmly. You must be Jessica. Sorry for the delay, creative emergencies don't exactly check schedules. Absolutely, I said, already liking her directness. Amy, Harrison greeted, and she quirked an eyebrow. You sitting in? If it's all right, he said evenly. I have a personal interest in this hire. Her gaze lingered on him for a beat, curious but unbothered. All right then. Let's use Aspen. The interview was unlike any I'd ever been through. Instead of rote questions about strengths and weaknesses, Amy dove straight into philosophy and real-world scenarios. She slid Innovate Tech's latest campaign materials across the table and asked, what would you do differently? I swallowed, then answered honestly, pointing out where visuals could connect more emotionally and where digital channels could integrate more seamlessly. Amy nodded as I spoke, scribbling occasional notes, but mostly listening, really listening. Harrison sat slightly back, his attention steady but never overbearing. When he spoke, his questions cut deeper, not to trip me up, but to draw out how I collaborated, how I handled pressure, how I adjusted when things went sideways. And to my own surprise, I didn't crumble under the weight of his gaze, I thrived. Words came easily, confidence rising with each exchange. Finally, Amy leaned back, pen tapping against her notebook. One last question, she said, flicking a glance at Harrison before turning back to me. Our developers are particular about their work. How do you handle strong personalities and creative conflict? I thought instantly of Amber, of years of swallowing criticism and smoothing tension, and how that forged something sharper in me. I try to look for the shared goal under the disagreement, I said. Most conflict isn't about ego, it's about wanting the best result, but seeing different ways to get there. If you can honor each perspective and still keep the end purpose in sight, resolution comes a lot easier. Amy studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Well said. She gathered her notes. We'll be in touch by Wednesday. Thank you, Jessica. As she left, Harrison tilted his head toward me. Do you have a few minutes? I'd like to give you a quick tour. I followed him through the open workspace, past clusters of designers and engineers, quiet pods, standing desks, even a rooftop garden that overlooked the city skyline. The place thrummed with energy, but it wasn't chaotic, it felt balanced, like the architecture itself was protecting creativity. What do you think? He asked as we stood by the glass railing, the city stretching out beneath us. It's incredible, I admitted, breathless. It feels intentional. Like every detail was designed to make people do their best work. That's exactly it, he said. When people feel valued, they produce brilliance. Back in the lobby, just before we parted, Harrison's tone softened. I hope this isn't intrusive, but how are things with your family since Tuesday? I sighed, the weight settling back on my chest. Complicated. They expect me to apologize to Amber. They don't see her behavior as the issue. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed gentle. Family patterns are stubborn. Took years for my brother and me to break ours. Whatever happens with this job, Jessica, don't lose the confidence you showed at Bellamy's. Self-advocacy matters everywhere, not just in jewelry stores. The word sank deep, like an anchor in shifting water. I smiled, touched. Thank you. Really. That means more than you know. Driving home later, the city lights flickering across my windshield, I replayed the week in my head. A slap in a jewelry store. A stranger stepping between me and my sister's rage. A coffee that led to an interview. And now, a door I never would have dared to knock on, suddenly wide open. Whether or not Innovate Tech hired me, I knew one thing, I was done shrinking. For the first time in my life, I believed I was exactly where I was meant to be. My phone lit up as I pulled into my apartment complex. Amber. For a second, I considered letting it ring out. But something in me wanted this conversation, maybe not on her terms, but finally, on mine. Hello, I answered. Jessica. Her voice was tight, like a wire pulled too far. We need to talk about what happened. I inhaled slowly. Yes, we do. But if you expect me to start by apologizing, this conversation isn't going to happen. Excuse me? Her tone sharpened instantly. You embarrassed me in front of my friends. No, Amber. You embarrassed yourself when you slapped me in public. That's assault, by the way. Oh, don't be so dramatic. It was barely a tap. It was hard enough to leave a mark, I shot back. And you did it because I wouldn't let you tear me down for buying something nice with my own money. This isn't about the stupid earrings, she snapped. It's about you trying to steal attention from my engagement. The old me would have crumbled under that accusation, would have rushed to prove I wasn't competing. Now it just sounded pitiful. Amber, my earrings have nothing to do with your engagement. Not everything revolves around you. There was a pause, then she said coldly, you've changed. You're not the same sister anymore. You're right, I said softly, but firmly. I have changed. I'm done shrinking myself just so you can feel bigger. The line went quiet long enough that I thought she might hang up. When she finally spoke again, her voice was cooler, rehearsed. Mom and Dad want us all at dinner Sunday. They expect you there. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. And the old me would have obeyed automatically. I'll think about it, I said instead. I've got a lot going on. Her scoff came sharp through the phone. What could you possibly have going on? I almost laughed at the familiarity of it. Actually, I interviewed at Innovate Tech today. The man who stepped in at Bellamy's? He arranged it. Silence. Then, flatly, you're making that up. Why would I make that up? To sound important, Amber said, but the cracks were in her voice now. Nobody just gets jobs through random encounters. Believe what you want, I replied, suddenly exhausted. I need to go. If I decide to come Sunday, I'll let Mom know. I hung up before she could spit out another retort. The call left me feeling a strange mix of sadness and freedom, like closing a book I'd carried too long. Sunday came with a text from Mom. Dinner at 5. Dad's making his pot roast. Please be on time and dress nicely. No mention of the jewelry store. No mention of Amber. Just the unspoken demand that we return to normal, like she could will the cracks closed by sheer force of habit. This time, I didn't slip quietly back into the old script. I texted back, I'll be there at 5:15. I have errands first. A small rebellion, but significant. When the hour came, I dressed with care, black jeans, a forest green blouse, and after a pause, my new diamond earrings. I tilted my head in the mirror, catching the glint of light. They were more than accessories, they were armor. The drive to my parents' house stretched longer than usual, each mile filled with the echo of imagined accusations. I practiced my lines out loud, firm but calm. Not defensive. Not apologetic. At 5:17, I pulled into their familiar driveway, palms slick against the steering wheel, pulse steadying itself. Whatever waited behind that front door, I wasn't walking in as the same Jessica they thought they knew. Dad's face tightened, like I'd spoken a foreign language he didn't want translated. Boundaries, he repeated, as though the word itself was offensive. Jessica, this is your family. You don't set rules for family. I met his gaze evenly. Then maybe that's been the problem all along. The silence that fell over the kitchen was dense, almost physical. The clink of a fork slipping from Mom's hand onto the counter seemed deafening. Amber crossed her arms and scoffed. So what, you're just going to abandon us? Because you think you're better than me? My laugh came out sharper than I meant. No, Amber. I'm not better than you. I just refuse to keep being treated as less than you. Her eyes widened, her mouth working like she had a dozen comebacks but none she dared say in front of our parents. Mom reached for her default script, her voice rising in brittle frustration. Jessica, why do you insist on dragging private issues out into the open? We're supposed to be sitting down for a meal. Do you realize how much stress you're causing your father? I turned toward her, my words measured but firm. Do you realize how much stress I've lived with for years because every single time Amber attacked me, you told me to swallow it, to be the bigger person? And when I finally refuse, when I finally draw a line, you call me dramatic. For the first time, Dad didn't immediately jump to Amber's defense. His brow furrowed, his mouth tight. He was listening, even if he didn't want to. Amber tried to recover the ground she was losing. You're twisting everything. You always blow things out of proportion, Jessica. Always the martyr, always the victim. I hit you once, and suddenly you're finally telling the truth. I cut in. And you don't get to define it anymore. The words hit the room like a door slamming shut. Amber's lips parted, but nothing came out. Mom blinked rapidly, her face pale. Dad rubbed a hand across his jaw like he was trying to erase the weight of the conversation. I straightened, smoothing my blouse as my heart thundered. I came tonight to make myself clear. I'm not here to beg for approval or play peacemaker. I'm here to say I'm done playing by rules that only serve one person in this family. I let my eyes rest on Amber for a beat before turning back to my parents. If that means I'm not welcome here, then so be it. Amber's face flushed crimson, but she didn't speak. Mom pressed a hand to her chest, scandalized. Jessica. Dad's voice was quiet, uncertain for the first time in years. So what happens now? I lifted my chin, my earrings catching the kitchen light like a reminder. Now? That's up to you. But I won't keep shrinking myself to fit a family story that was never mine to begin with. And with that, the pot roast cooling on the counter and my parents staring as if I'd just torn down the house itself, I turned toward the dining room, ready to sit at the table, or walk out the door, on my terms. Dad's fork hovered in midair. For once, there was no quick dismissal, no sigh of impatience. He actually looked impressed. That sounds promising, he said carefully, like he wasn't sure how far he was allowed to go. Amber's knuckles whitened around her water glass. It's not even a job offer yet, she muttered. It's just an interview. Trevor glanced at her, then back at me. Interviews at Innovate Tech aren't easy to come by. I've known people who tried for years without getting through the door. I gave him a small smile. I know. I'm still processing it. Mom shifted in her seat, her expression torn between pride and discomfort. Well, we are proud of you, Jessica. She said it softly, like the words were foreign in her mouth. Amber set her glass down with a clink. This is ridiculous. Jessica buys earrings she can't afford, makes a scene in public, and suddenly she's some kind of hero because she stumbled into an interview. I met her glare evenly. I bought those earrings with my own money I earned from my promotion. And I didn't stumble into anything, I was prepared. That's why Harrison thought I was worth recommending. The name alone silenced her. She shifted in her chair, twisting her napkin until it nearly tore. Trevor cleared his throat. Well, I think it's admirable. And honestly, Harrison Walsh doesn't waste his time on people he doesn't believe in. The table went quiet again. Dad coughed into his hand, and for the first time in years, he looked directly at me without the usual veil of skepticism. If this turns into something, Jessica, it could change your life. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It already has, I admitted. Because whether I get the job or not, I know what I'm capable of. And I won't let anyone make me feel small for it again. Amber's jaw clenched. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad leaned back, silent, processing. And Trevor, of all people, gave me a quiet, steady nod. The apple pie sat untouched between us, steam curling from its crust, but the sweetness of the moment wasn't lost on me. For the first time in a very long time, the room wasn't arranged around Amber's spotlight. It was centered on me. And I wasn't giving that up again. My mother's voice was softer than I'd heard in years. That's wonderful, Jessica. We are proud of you, you know, even if we don't always show it properly. The words caught me off guard. They weren't a full apology, not even close. But the sincerity in her tone loosened something inside me, and before I could stop it, my eyes stung with tears. A beginning, that's what it felt like. Amber didn't say much during the rest of dinner. She sat quieter than usual, her usual barbs absent. But as we cleared the dessert plates, she drifted into the kitchen, phone tucked away, her voice low. Did you really meet Harrison Walsh? I rinsed a dish under warm water and nodded. Yes. He mistook me for his wife at first. She hesitated, her gaze flickering. That's actually pretty cool. I turned, searching her face for sarcasm, for the knife I was used to hidden in the compliment. But for once, her expression looked genuine. The earrings look nice on you, she added, awkward but almost kind. I shouldn't have made such a scene at the store. It wasn't a clean apology, but coming from Amber, it was monumental. I chose to meet her halfway. Thank you. And your ring is beautiful. Trevor seems like a good person. Her lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. He is. He actually lectured me about the slapping thing. Said it was unacceptable. I raised my brows, surprised. Smart man. Yeah, she admitted with a small sigh. Maybe I got lucky with this one. Driving home, the night pressing soft against my windows, I thought about the subtle shifts that had unfolded. Nothing had been tied up in a neat bow, no tearful reconciliations, no grand speeches, but something had shifted. In them, maybe. In me, certainly. My phone buzzed just as I pulled into my apartment complex. An unknown number lit up the screen. Jessica, it's Harrison Walsh. Amy was very impressed with your interview. Before we make a formal offer, Claire would like to meet you. She returns from London tomorrow. Lunch on Tuesday. Let me know if you're available. I stared at the words, breath caught in my chest. Before we make a formal offer. Innovate Tech. This wasn't just a door opening, it was the whole world unfolding in front of me. I typed my enthusiastic yes with trembling fingers, then glanced up at the rearview mirror. The diamonds in my ears flashed under the streetlight, scattering sparks like tiny stars. They were beautiful, yes. But more than that, they were a symbol. Of resilience. Of self-worth. Of the moment I decided my value wasn't tethered to my sister's shadow or my parents' approval. Sometimes the hardest confrontations carve out the deepest growth. And sometimes, a single slap in a jewelry store can redirect the entire course of a life. 1 month later, I sat at my new desk on the 12th floor of Innovate Tech headquarters, finishing the final slides of a presentation for the security app launch. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the space in gold and glassy brightness. My desk was sleek and minimal, dual monitors glowing with polished designs, and next to them sat a tiny potted succulent, my team's welcome gift. It was such a small thing, but every time I looked at it, I felt the quiet warmth of belonging. The speed of it all still left me reeling. One moment, I was defending myself in a jewelry store. Weeks later, I was shaking hands with Amy Sullivan again, this time not as a candidate but as her new senior creative strategist. The day after I'd met Claire Walsh, whose resemblance to me had started this strange chain of events, the offer letter arrived in my inbox. The salary was almost double what I'd been earning at Boyd Creative, with benefits I never dreamed of, stock options, flexible scheduling, a development budget for conferences and training. Handing in my notice to Natalie had been bittersweet. She'd been my mentor for years, and I half expected her to talk me into staying. Instead, she hugged me. Only you, Jessica, she laughed, shaking her head, could turn getting slapped in public into a career move. At Innovate Tech, the title came with both freedom and pressure. Senior Creative Strategist. I led a small but brilliant team shaping the visual identity and user experience of our consumer apps. The work was fast-paced, demanding, but so fulfilling I often lost track of time in it. For the first time, I wasn't just tolerated in a room, I was sought out for my perspective. Claire became an unexpected ally. Despite the Walsh name and the life that came with it, she was grounded, sharp, and, surprisingly, easy to laugh with. We'd sometimes have lunch in the rooftop garden, sitting under a canopy of greenery while the city buzzed below. Harrison told me about the jewelry store, she admitted once, her tone kind. I have a brother. Our dynamic was difficult. Took years of therapy before I stopped chasing his approval. I remember just staring at her, struck by the irony. The woman who seemed to have everything was carrying her own scars. Somehow, that made me feel less alone. Harrison, for his part, kept things professional. No favoritism, no indulgence. Just the occasional thoughtful question about a project, or a comment that pushed me to sharpen my ideas. The others didn't see me as Harrison's find, they saw me as Jessica, the one who'd earned her place. That was maybe the biggest relief of all. Outside of work, I'd made changes too. My new apartment was modest but brighter, with space for a reading nook by the window, a fitness center downstairs, and a community garden where neighbors exchanged tips about herbs and tomatoes. Practical, yes, closer to the office. But also symbolic. A fresh start. And in my jewelry box, the diamond studs still gleamed, waiting. I wore them for big presentations, important meetings, or on days I needed the reminder. They weren't just earrings. They were proof. Proof that the moment I refused to be diminished, the moment I stood tall against my sister's slap, was the moment my life shifted. I hadn't just bought diamonds. I'd bought clarity. I'd bought freedom. And every time they sparkled against my skin, I remembered, I would never shrink myself to fit into someone else's shadow again. My phone buzzed again as Claire and I paused near a bronze sculpture of two figures reaching skyward. It was Amber. Looking forward to next Saturday. Mom will be happy you're there. Simple. Direct. Almost normal. I slipped the phone back into my bag, shaking my head a little. That was my sister, I told Claire. She invited me to Mom's birthday dinner. Claire smiled knowingly. How do you feel about it? I let out a breath, watching the last of the daylight filter through the trees. Hopeful. Cautious. But mostly, ready. For the first time, I feel like I get to walk into that house as myself, not as the shadow of someone else. Claire nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's the difference confidence makes. It doesn't erase the past, but it changes how you stand in it. As we resumed our walk, I thought about how far I'd come in a matter of weeks. From being humiliated in a jewelry store to leading high-stakes projects at one of the most innovative companies in the world. From absorbing Amber's cruelty in silence to standing tall, speaking truth, and drawing lines that couldn't be erased. The earrings rested lightly against my ears, catching the fading light. They weren't just diamonds anymore, they were a reminder. Of the day I stopped shrinking. Of the woman I chose to become. And as I walked beside Claire, listening to her describe her keynote speech, I realized that the greatest change of all wasn't my job, my apartment, or even my family dynamics. It was the way I now carried myself, not as someone waiting for permission to belong, but as someone who already did. I stood there for a moment, fingers brushing the velvet of the jewelry box, watching the diamonds scatter light across my kitchen like tiny constellations. They weren't just accessories anymore. They were markers, reminders of the day I stopped apologizing for existing, the day I chose not to shrink but to step fully into my own worth. The oven timer dinged, pulling me back to the present. I stirred the simmering sauce, humming without realizing it, the melody, light and content. my life was far from perfect. Family dinners would still come with undercurrents of tension. Amber's big news would probably demand center stage again. Old patterns didn't disappear overnight. But now? Now I knew I didn't have to play along. I could sit at that table, listen, smile, and still hold space for my own story. Her joy didn't erase mine. Her spotlight didn't dim my shine. There was room enough in this world for both of us. As I plated my dinner, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. For the first time in a long time, the woman looking back wasn't someone waiting for permission to belong. She was someone who already did. And the truth pulsed steady inside me. Sometimes the slap meant to break you becomes the spark that remakes you. Sometimes the cruelest words echo into the loudest affirmations of your own strength. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living, fully and unapologetically, in your own magnificent light.